You don't like your environment? Move. You don't like your job? Get better skills to get another job. You don't like your relationship status? Leave him or her. We all can still choose that.
Matt Matros. After selling his healthy food chain 10 years ago, Matt battled depression, anxiety, regret, and alcohol addiction. Yet, he didn't stop. He built and sold 2 more businesses, started a family, traveled the world, and became a highly respected voice in the business world. How did he overcome his struggles? With his signature humor and crystal clear insight, Matt opens his heart to share with us the mental frameworks that propelled him forward.
Most people think therapists tell you what to do. If they do, they're therapists. I got a basket of issues. Let's start with alcoholism. I was unlucky in that my dad died when I was 11, dropped dead, heart attack, middle of the night. Money is a lubricant to happiness. I just done the psychedelic drug. I just seen 17 countries, done cool experiences. Business models are very rarely created. They're usually just borrowed or applied or evolved from others. And that's also true of human psychology, which is why we can kind of predict the future because it rhymes with the past.
Hi, Matt.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you here.
I've been told I have a face for radio, and now I know exactly what people are talking about.
You don't. You look wonderful. I'm really excited to talk to you today about your post-exit journey, because your first life-changing exit was 10 years ago, which means you had enough time to process things, and I know you processed them quite deeply. You wrote beautiful pieces about your thoughts, and I'm very inspired to dig deeper today into those.
I'm happy to. I'm an open book. Is it okay if I occasionally drop a cuss word?
Absolutely. You do whatever you want.
It just sort of, it's visceral to me sometimes. I don't mean to, but sometimes it just comes out.
So can I take you back to that moment when you sold your company and you were free to do whatever you wanted? How did it feel?
I'm kind of sweating just thinking about it, sort of PTSD.
Good.
It was October the 1st, 2013. I had been working on Protein Bar, which was a chain of restaurants. Or it started as a smoothie shop, but I turned into a restaurant that I turned into a chain of restaurants, or fast casual restaurants, opened 25 of them across the country. Sold a majority of the business to L. Catterton, which is the premier consumer-focused private equity firm. So I felt incredibly fortunate that I was able to not only sell my business, but to sell it to a partner that I wanted to continue to grow with. So I sold about 60% of the company. At the time, I owned about half of the business. Now, which the cap table hasn't changed much. I'm about 15 or 16% of the business. So I personally went from owning about half to owning 16. Everybody in the business sold 60%. And it was a $25 million transaction, which in 2013 was a huge number. Now it seems nothing. Like it's almost like the inflation of venture and PE. But in 2013, 25 million was a pretty large number. A good amount of it went to the balance sheet, and a good amount of it went to what's called a secondary offering. So me and our existing 60 or so shareholders took cash out. So I'll never forget. It was October 1st, 2013. I went out to a celebratory dinner with my first investor and his girlfriend and my girlfriend at the time, and we toasted Justin Isosceles Cabernet, and we toasted to the future. And I was rolling 40% of my equity, so I was staying in control, and thought I was essentially given a gas can of kerosene to pour gasoline on the fire to really roll the things out. But unfortunately, things just didn't go as planned for me or for the business or even really for Catterton, to be frank. And I've had to deal with that ever since. It's my therapy Thursday, which I literally have every other Thursday with my therapist since 2015. But there's a struggle. And I like to say that I invented imposter syndrome, or I had imposter syndrome before it was cool, before everybody sort of said they did. Because I oftentimes, and by often I mean like every day, look back at that experience as a failure. And the failure is because I didn't take that business, Protein Bar, from A to Z. I wasn't Bill Gates, who started Microsoft in his dorm room at Harvard, took it to what it is today. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, who started Facebook in his dorm room at Harvard, took it to what it is today, or Elon Musk. So it's taken me a while to recognize the fact I'm just not those guys or those gals like Sarah Blakely to take it from A to Z. And it's been a tough thing to deal with, especially in today's age of celebrating wins. And you only see the wins. You tend not to see the losses, or you tend not to recognize that the wins come after an amalgamation of many losses. So that's sort of what I've been deciding to do within the social media sphere, specifically with the content that I'm putting out, is to kind of try to tell the truth a little bit about what happens, either both for startup founders building businesses or for folks after they have what on the outside, from a facade perspective, seems like it's such a life-changing exit. And don't get me wrong, it was. And I'm very grateful. It certainly was. It just wasn't what I thought. And it wasn't what I had planned. And it wasn't what, on October 1st, when I toasted that Justin Isosceles Cabernet, which I still miss, I just didn't think it would go as the next 10 years went. And that's okay.
Did you regret selling your business?
I get asked this a lot. And this is part of I'm sweating again thinking about it. This is part of like the daily therapy that I have to do. Hindsight is easy to say that I regret, right? So it's easy to look back, and because things didn't go as planned, you have regret. But it doesn't mean at the time, this is what I have to remind myself every day. At the time, I made the greatest decision with the most amount of information possible. So certainly no regret. In fact, I was on the top of the world. And arguably, I kind of sold at the peak. So that's the part that's fortunate for me when I look back in the hindsight of timing, and I look back at the hindsight of, the cash that I was able personally to take, quote unquote, off the table. So I'm very lucky. So I don't regret it. I guess my only regret, and this is what I counsel founders on, and in my instance, I was selling a majority of the business. So I always tell founders, if you're going to sell a majority of the business, just sell as much of it as you can. Because you're giving up.
You'd rather not be involved at all after you.
Less about being involved, but more just knowing that so much of my future economic value was controlled by someone else. Now, sure, I was the CEO of the business, but I didn't control the business. I didn't control the future of it. I couldn't control the capital. I couldn't control the financing. I basically had a boss, right? So for founders who are contemplating usually some sort of liquidity event, and they're thinking about, is it minority, is it majority? I typically tell them, don't do what I did, which was sell 60, sell 85%. And you can still roll a bunch, you can still be involved, still be the CEO, but just try to take as much of it out as you can. Obviously, it's easier said than done, and I'm an N of one, who, looking back 10 years ago, I guess at this point it'd be 10 and a half years ago, what the decisions that were going into it, what I would do different, but every founder is different, and it's subject to their circumstances.
So the negative feelings you have about selling, it come from the fact that you compare yourself to people whom you consider, I guess, role models, or you respect them a lot.
I think there's a twofold negative feeling that happens. I don't necessarily have a negative feeling about selling per se, because I certainly sold at the peak, and it has been a life-changing opportunity for me, because I've been able to do other stuff, which perhaps we'll talk about. So it's less about the regret of selling. It's more the two things that sort of happened since. One was, as I mentioned, just sort of the give up. I gave up so much control to other people. And that's not bad. They're the most reputable people you'd want to give up control to. But it wasn't me. So I had a boss, right? So that was sort of like the first vector of it, And then I guess I would say, and it's sort of hard to talk about this one necessarily, I guess the second one, as it relates to it, is more just sort of around my own identity with the business. Once I sold it, I wasn't that guy anymore. So it was less about the act of selling and more just about sort of the circumstances that have followed since. And because of that identity thing, it's led to my own personal insecurities. It's led to my own personal self-worth. It's led to my own personal demons, if you will, relating to it. So it's not that I hate selling. It's just I hate the 10 years that have been since. But most of that's my doing.
You lost half of your identity, really. You were CEO and founder, and then you were still the CEO of the company, but not the founder.
Great point.
That founder bit was more important for you found?
Yeah, it's, I always say for a guy like me, founder is always the most important thing, and I'll always be the founder. You'll never take it away. protein bar has 20 units or 2,000 or 200,000 units one day, I'll always be the founder. Now, that may be worth nothing except a hug from my son, but, from a founder's pride perspective, it's important. Even to this day, the business actually is in a good position now. So it has an opportunity to live on for a very long, long, long time. I live in New York now. We're opening a location in LaGuardia, so that'll be exceptional for me and my family from a street cred perspective. But less around the identity of me being tied to the brand, and more just around me waking up and controlling my own destiny, right? So that's why entrepreneurship was my calling, and it may be for most founders, is that you wake up and you control the outcome by your actions. And it's your actions and luck and timing and circumstance, but by and large, they always say the harder you work, the luckier you get. And then the second I sold, I didn't control those anymore. Yeah, sure, I went to go perform, but it was a job. It wasn't me. Yeah. That's more kind of what I mean about the identity linking to it. It's sort of a eat what you kill type mentality to now I'm just a soldier for someone else.
So once it became a job, you lost control. How did it affect you in any different way? Like, for example, could you still channel your creativity through your business? Or that also changed because you suddenly became an employee rather than the owner?
Yeah, so it 100% changed. And again, it's not me versus private equity or me versus anyone else. It was more, I had a vision for what I wanted the business to be. My private equity partner had an underwriting plan. Those are different than a vision, right? A vision is ethereal, and I wake up and go to sleep and I think about this vision, and it's touchy feely, and an underwriting plan is just the backbone or the nuts and bolts of that vision. Those two things are different. So I found that instead of building towards a vision, I was really trying to build towards achieving an underwriting plan, which you're probably thinking to yourself, or maybe the viewers are thinking to themselves, well, it's still a business, right? So you have to follow a plan. Don't get me wrong, I had a plan, but once you have someone else's plan, it's just different. It's especially one has a plan for a specific goal. And in the instance of private equity, there is a specific goal. We're giving you money because people gave us money. Take that money and turn it into 3 to infinity times more than it was when we gave it to you. Oh, by the way, do that in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
We really want you to do it in 2 to 3 years. But everything changes. Yeah. It's instead of looking at something in the future and working backwards towards it, you're looking at something in the future and trying to build up to it. And that was a big difference. Yeah, not right or wrong, just different for me.
Did you feel like your dream was taken away from you?
Wow, I've never been asked that in that perspective. I don't think so, necessarily, because I was given a gift of money, right? So it wasn't free. It was an equal exchange or a fair exchange. So nothing was taken. It was transacted. So no, I never have really thought about it like that. And interestingly, as I mentioned, I had opened 25 units where, through COVID and this and that, and the business is at 16 units with another several on the way. So it's contracted in 10 years. But it's also healthy. The business is healthy. Not that it wasn't 10 years ago, but it's in a healthy position, and it has an opportunity to continue to thrive. So, nothing was taken. No dream was taken. The original vision could still be the plan that the existing management team is running against, which is changing the way people eat on the go. Gosh, I haven't said that in so long, but that was like the original vision. Change the way people eat on the go.
Yeah.
And it's still there. We're opening airport locations, which is where people are on the go. So it's still there.
So how much time do you spend on that business now?
Like 0.0000001% of my time. There's a great management team. Catterton owns it. Every now and again, the management team will call me with some sort of a question. Usually it's tactical in nature, like tell me about this landlord that you signed a lease with. Or I did have a board position. I'm no longer on the board. That was my choosing. But yeah, zero involvement. And now I don't even live in Chicago, so it's even less involved. I moved to New York So I'm just not around all the stores. When I'm back in Chicago, I'll be a customer, so I'll walk in, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, that's Matt," and sometimes people will just think I'm some schmo. But no real involvement day to day. I'll be excited when we open in New York, in LaGuardia Airport this spring or summer.
That's where you live now, right? In New York.
Yeah, I moved to Brooklyn about a year and a half ago.
So how did you sustain motivation after you no longer were an owner, but you had to run the company?
I don't know that I did. Yeah, I think in hindsight, I lost some mojo. October 1st, 2013, we toasted that Justin Isosceles Cabernet, which I'll talk about a lot. I love that. I've since quit drinking, so I very much miss Cabernet. And my whole life changed. And everything, specifically that following year when I still ran the company, everything changed after that. So the three biggest changes were, one, I actually had money, as someone who grew up with not really much. And someone who started working as an 18-year-old for a sports agency, and someone who, went to work at Kraft Foods, which is a perfectly fine job. Like, I never really had lots of money, but now all of a sudden I did. So I became a millionaire, right, as proverbially people would say. So that's the thing that happened, number one. I think that happened, number two, is I had a boss, right? It wasn't me waking up doing whatever I thought was best for the business. It was me waking up doing what those guys thought was best for the business. And then third, my own ego that came with the transaction, either because I had money or because I had a big public transaction. I started running a little bit in the wrong crowd, of high-flying entrepreneurs that, are great humans, but just aren't really me. I was dating a very toxic woman who was sort of money and tangible things centric, and that was a bad sort of relationship. So it was like this year of muck that sort of followed between my own bad decisions that came from having money, like buying a freaking condo I didn't need to. I mean, it's beautiful and I made money when I sold it, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't need to do it. And running with this girlfriend and running with a crowd of high-flying entrepreneurs, it just wasn't in my nature to do that. I think in hindsight, if I could do things that were more in my nature, in my DNA, I would have, but I was trying to punch above my weight class. I was trying to do what I thought guys that just had sold their business for millions of dollars did, but it wasn't me. And that's kind of the big deal.
How did you find this road back to yourself?
I'm still on it. What are you talking about? How did I find it? I haven't found it yet.
It's been 10 years. You made some progress.
True. Yeah, it's been 10 years. But to be frank, only recently, and by recently I mean within the last several months, through therapy, have I started to zoom out on the situation and think of my experience with Protein Bar, and then my subsequent experience with Limitless and selling to Kurt Dr. Pepper, and then my next one of Shopflix exiting to QVC. Zoom out and thinking of it as a small period of time in my life, and even more existentially, a small period of time in the history of sort of me and the world and humanity. So just recognizing that these are sort of small blips. And then if you picture a stock chart, right? If you look at the one-day stock chart, you see lots of up and downs, but if you zoom out on it in the lifetime, you don't see as much. It tends to smooth out. So that's sort of the approach that I'm trying to take now, especially as I'm 44, and I'm kind of thinking I'm at that middle point of my life, so trying to make the back half as strong and as possible.
I talked a lot to people who exited their companies a year, two ago. And when I mentioned to them that statistically it takes a decade to get over a life-changing exit, they get shocked. Yet every time I talk to someone who exited 10 years ago or more, they totally understand what I'm talking about. And my first big exit was 13 years ago. And it was about 10, 11 years when I really started feeling, okay, now I'm out of that cycle. Now I've learned my lessons. Now I know what I'm going to do next. But it's not what people expect at all. They think, a few weeks, a few months, and I'm ready. But usually it's not the case.
Yeah, and I guess it really depends on the level of trauma that folks experience, right? So I would say I had a quote unquote more traumatic experience with my exit, just because I rolled so much equity and it didn't go as planned, versus selling it for gobs of money and now just being completely out, or whatever the other circumstances are. So I'd be curious if yours had an amount of trauma related to it. I also have deep-rooted insecurities, right? I guess we all do, but mine are actually...
Don't we all? Exactly.
Some of the deepest. My dad died when I was 11, so that creates a lot of abandonment issues and trust issues and superiority and seniority issues that I have. I grew up the fat kid, so the ridicule and bullying that came with that. Like, there's just lots of my own basket of insecurities, but I could see how that 10-year point, like I finally, and maybe that's a good point. So about a year ago is when I left the board of Protein Bar, where I was just like, what am I doing here? So perhaps that is a good data point in favor of, or to support or corroborate your point about 10 years.
So what prompted you to start therapy?
Gosh. So I sold Protein Bar, ran it for a year, then got fired. I say I got fired. Catterton jokes that, like, Matt, we didn't fire you. We just asked you to take some time off and then replaced you. I'm like, potato. So we found someone to replace me at Protein Bar, and a gentleman who came from Chipotle. And then Catterton said, hey, Matt, just, take a quarter off. So to me, this was in November, and our first board meeting, or our next board meeting, was in April. So basically I had from November to April off. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I needed to leave Chicago. I couldn't be around the stores. I couldn't be the Protein Bar guy. I called Stanford and said, hey, I want to come do an exec ed program. They're like, great, yeah, we have 6-month exec ed programs. They start in January. I'm like, oh, dang, I have from November to April. So then I traveled. I booked a around the world pass, which is the single greatest deal in travel, $14,000 all the way around the world, business class. It was remarkable. And left and just did a sort of an eat, pray, love style trip, all to myself. Spent a lot of the money that I just made. And then came back and in April, and Protein Bar was like, great, we want to have you back in, and we'd love to have you do some of these things. And I was good. I was like, no, I'm good. I want to go do some other stuff in the world. So this is the gift. Part of the gift of selling the business was that I didn't have to go back. I had choice. And I was able to choose to do other things.
What that globe-trotting experience give you?
Separation. I also experienced psychedelic drugs for the first time. I took a drug called Ibogaine, which was, psychedelics are in vogue now, which I think is great. Mm-hmm. I think everyone should experience psychedelics, particularly if they've had something, a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. They're sort of mind expanding. So I used this drug Ibogaine in Mexico where it was legal. And it allowed me to just sort of come back and realize that all the anxieties that we have in our life, we create them ourselves, like in our own head. So if something causes you anxiety, and as I'm saying this, I'm trying to remind myself of this every day. If something is causing you anxiety, just get it out of your life in some form or another. Whether it's a bad human that's in your life or it's a bad behavior, just change it. And we all have the power to control those behaviors. Mm-hmm. And that's how I've been living ever since. Some days great, some days not so great, but by and large, most days great. So when I came back from the globe trotting experience, I was riding high. Like, everything was great. I had just done the psychedelic drug. I had just seen 17 countries, done cool experiences, Israel, Africa, Bali, and, can keep going. So things were good. And I wanted to keep them good. I also wanted to try to develop better behaviors. So one of my best friends in the world, a gentleman named Pete Caden, said that he was working with a wonderful therapist and that he really trusted. Unfortunately, he couldn't see her anymore because of his life circumstances geographically. So I said, great. Sounds like a great recommendation. And we hit it off. And fortunately, she made room in her life for me, Dr. Nira. And she's wonderful. So it's been every other Thursday since April of 2015. It works out to about 10 sessions a year, about 20 sessions a year, because there's some days or some weeks I can't see her. For example, this week I couldn't see her. But the best part about therapy is and this is also contrarian to what most people think. Most people think therapists tell you what to do. If they do, they're shitty therapists, right? The beauty of therapy should be hearing yourself say things. All these things that have been bunched up in your head, actually putting them out into the universe and then listening to how those sounds and then realizing like, wait a second, that's either incongruous with what I want to do or it sounds a little bizarre. And then having that sort of hit home. And then this therapist just holding you accountable to those things and just reminding you that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you said this thing. How's that working out for you? And that's the role that Dr. Nirameta has played for me. And that's what I encourage folks to find. And I do think that if someone's going through therapy and they're not having transformational experiences with it, just try someone new. It's okay. Like, you shouldn't bunch all therapists into one bucket. Some are better than others, just as some pair of jeans fit better than other pairs of jeans. So try. But ultimately speaking, and I've seen this with people close to me, you have to want to have that level of help. You have to want to have that level of support. And if you don't, you're just going to phone it in and you may end up getting nothing out of it.
Is there a particular example you could give me of an issue you worked through with your therapist and it was a really important, life-changing?
I mean, I got a basket of them. Yeah, I got a basket of issues, but let's start with alcohol. Let's start with alcoholism. So, I never really thought of myself as an alcoholic, right? Now I'm in my 40s, but I was in my early 30s, single, urban, had money. So like my alcohol consumption sort of centered around social life, right? Like I'm a dude hanging out with my buddies, watching games, going to bars, trying to meet women. That's what you do. And we were having fun, and we were really good at having fun. Whether me and my crew, we were just really good at having fun. So what that meant was very high volume of alcohol consumption, mostly centered in the weekends, right? I was a high-performing post-MBA brand marketer at Kraft Foods, and then, so I could really only consume alcohol during the weekends, and then I moved on to be an entrepreneur, and then I was kind of making my own schedule, so consuming alcohol sort of whenever I wanted, but I was also single, so I was dating a lot, and the cornerstone of early courtship tends to be alcohol, unfortunately. And then in 2006, I had viral meningitis, and it turned into shingles. And it was a very rare thing for someone at my age. I was 25 or 26 to get. And I never forget, I'm sitting in this hospital in North Shore of Chicago, and these doctors come in, and they're all trying to figure out, how did this 25-year-old healthy triathlete guy get shingles and viral meningitis? It seems so unusual. And all they could really come up with in the course of asking and interviewing me was my alcohol consumption. So they'd ask me the questions, like, do you drink? Do you smoke? I'm like, oh, no, I don't smoke. Do you drink? Sure. How much you drink? 10 to 15 cocktails every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and some days during the week. And they're like, oh, in total? No, each night. There's a high volume of consumption. Long story short, because I could probably go on forever, I always knew that I had a problem with it. And every time a primary care physician, or every time a therapist, or every time a doctor would say, hey, maybe you should look into this, I would always go do those quizzes, am I an alcoholic? And they'd have 10 questions, and there'd be maybe 2 or 3 of them that I would get wrong or right, depending on your perspective. So there's like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't get 10 out of 10, because there's these 2 or 3. And usually the 2 or 3 that I didn't answer were, do you wake up first thing in the morning needing alcohol? No. All right, that was never me. I never woke up needing it. And the second one is, do you need alcohol throughout the day to sort of maintain, a normal lifestyle? I was like, oh, no. So because of those 2 questions and maybe a third one, I was like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. So I denied this for years. Denied it for years. Yeah. And I'd always go see Nira, and I'd always talk to her about it, and she'd always say, I knew I needed to make a change, but this was many years I knew I needed to make a change. And it wasn't a topic in our therapy every other week, maybe once every couple weeks, or usually maybe it related to a story I was telling. Then as I was aging, I was starting to consume it more frequently, 6-7 nights a week, and pretty high amounts. I was starting to behave not like myself. And she always had this book behind her shelf. In fact, sometimes I keep it here because it really changed. It was called Under the Influence. And And finally, after about 2.5 years of seeing her, I asked her about this book. Nira, what's this book, Under the Influence? And she says, here you go, you want money, you read it. So I read this book, and this book made me realize that brains can perform well on alcohol, but at some point it crashes. And at some point there's a precipitous decline, which is usually marked by some sort of tragedy, right? You get a DUI, you hit someone, God forbid you kill yourself or you harm yourself or harm others. Mm-hmm. And I was just nervous I was coming to that. So because of her support and her not pushing, not nudging, and being there, I was able to commit to quit drinking in October of 2016. And she's been my co-pilot, I guess, for that. Now, the interesting thing is, yes, I've quit drinking, and it's been a wonderful success, at least for me personally. It's a very difficult thing to do. Folks that suffer from addiction are diseased, and it's hard for us. I think about California Cabernet every day. But I do know that was a pretty remarkable win for me. So I always reflect back on that, and I always say, well, if I could do that, I can do this. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of one where it was a pretty big breakthrough, and I've now used that as a way to apply to other things, whether it's changing my sleep habits. Well, I know if I can quit drinking, changing my sugar consumption, changing my caffeine intake, like I know if I can quit drinking, I can do this.
Amazing. That's such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. So talking about your dating and personal life, how do you think your whole post-exit experience changed the way you look at that side of your life?
I'm lucky, right? I see folks who start businesses who have family or children, and I don't envy them for that. I'm starting 2 businesses right now, and it's hard with the balance. Fortunately, it's offset by, not eating ramen like I was when I started my first company. So having a family in this stage of my life, it just puts things a little bit in perspective. Now I'm lucky, right? I have a little bit of money in the bank, and not a lot, right? I still need to do stuff. Like, it's like I'm retired. I still need to do work. But because I have that situation, I'm able to separate the two, business and personal. I also, though, do always like having entrepreneurship as a way to model hard work for my son. He's 3 years old, but I want to show him what entrepreneurship is. I just so happen to block 12 to 2 on my calendar every day so I can have lunch with him when I'm home. And I try to be there at his, nighttime, but I also want to model hard work for him. So Saturdays and Sundays and, and trips that I'm taking help do that. So I guess, again, the pro is that I have a family that helps me think differently and help me put different perspective on things. The con is that I recognize not everybody is in this position to be able to balance. I'm pretty lucky. The other part of it, too, that I've always said is all of my businesses are consumer businesses. Well, now I have 2 that are B2B, but it's like we're not saving lives. We're not a doctor. Right? Like, nothing is that urgent. I'm making burritos or selling, limitless sparkling water or, selling lipstick on my video shopping startup. Like, nothing is that life-changing or a lot, that you either have to be a jerk or that you have to prioritize things differently. Like, it's consumer. So I'm pretty lucky in that. By contrast to maybe friends who are in cybersecurity or defense or, health tech.
Do you have a sense of purpose? This
is something that I'm starting to work on right now. More centered around that Ikigai concept, if you're familiar with Ikigai. So 4 concentric circles. What are you good at? What can you get paid for? What do you enjoy? And then what does the world need? All 4 of those sort of mashing together and then finding that central purpose. For me, my purpose exclusively is to support my child and my wife so that they can live their greatest dreams. Now, second to that, to help support that, is this Ikigai concept, which for me, I've really started to learn, and it's evolving, but I really feel like what I'm really good at, what the world needs, what I could get paid for, and what I enjoy is supporting other really good founders, other really good operators to help them be better versions of themselves, almost like their co-pilot, using my 15 years of mistakes as rubric, but also reminding them that they collectively, for the operators or founders, are pretty awesome too, right? And that it is hard. and that you are going to have psychological issues. You are going to have mental health issues. So learn from me. And if alcoholism is an issue, learn from me. Or if balance is an issue, learn from me. Ways to make them be better versions of themselves. So that's right now. My purpose is really my son, making him happy and healthy, like every parent would say. And then secondarily to that is finding and supporting entrepreneurs that have growth mindset. Third to that is I recognize I was very fortunate just by the zip code I was born into and the color I was born into. Being a white male born in, Los Angeles, California, gave me inherent advantages. And I also recognize there was a number of invisible hands along the way that helped me, whether it's Mrs. Jones, my kindergarten teacher, or all the PTA, or all the Little League coaches, or Michael Bailey, my science teacher in 6th grade, like the circumstances that I encountered along the way that got me to where I am. I'm trying to be that invisible hand for as many people as possible, especially for those who don't typically have access to opportunity for whatever reason, either because of the zip code or their economic situation or because of the color of their skin.
So you're sharing your experience on social networks.
That's where it starts. Yeah, that's really where it starts. And if people want to listen to it, great. If they don't, that's fine too. I never really thought of myself as someone who'd be a content creator. In fact, it still sounds a little weird. So I don't necessarily think of myself that way. I'm in a group of other men and women who are trying to build their audience. And I guess one thing that's different for me is, while yes, of course I want to build my audience, I don't think about it as much. I don't really follow some of those like content creatory rules that you want to follow, Sure, I try to make the best stuff possible, but if I try to do one post a day, and sometimes they're stinkers and sometimes they're great, but so for me, it's really just about delivering the truth based on my experiences. And if people care about it, great. And if they don't, that's fine too. So it's almost purely selfish. I hate to say it. It's like my own catharsis, my own.
Isn't it perfect talking about Ikigai, that it works for you, but it works for other people as well? That's great. Right. That ticks the boxes. Right. I follow you. I think lots of people follow you. So it's working.
I appreciate
you're doing the right thing.
It's been rewarding. Like, it's something that I didn't expect, is how many people out of the blue are sending me notes. Just in appreciation. So if you know the 5 love languages, I'm like definitely a words of affirmation kind of guy, right? So when folks send me messages, or if I run into them at the gym or whatever, or see them at trade shows, and they're like, oh, I love your, I'm like, thanks. I appreciate that. Like, it's affirming, right, for me.
Do you want to talk about 5 love languages and how it affected your life?
I'm a believer in the 5 love languages. Whether or not folks think it's hokey, I think it can be applied to all parts of human psychology and all relationships, because it is so deeply psychological. I don't necessarily have them all recited off the top of my head. So if I tried, perhaps I would butcher it, but maybe let me try. So
I'm just curious how it helped you. If you have specific examples or why you believe in it.
Where the 5 love languages has helped me both personally and professionally is just knowing what I need and what I don't need, right? And then finding folks that supply what I need. Here's a good example. Communication. I'm such a communication person. Now, I know this doesn't necessarily relate to love languages, although maybe it does, because words of affirmation is my love language, and communication is, you need to communicate words of affirmation. So I've just found that if I don't click with someone purely on a communication perspective, it doesn't matter how smart they are. It doesn't matter what their vision is. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm better or worse. I'm just saying we don't have a rapport. Yeah. Then it becomes almost a non-starter, whatever that relationship happens to be, whether it's an employee-employer, or whether it's a partner, a vendor, or someone I want to do business with. If I don't have a communication that jives with them, it's game over. So that's a big deal for me. So that's actually a perfect example of how 5 love languages has been a framework that I've used in other parts of my world.
Are there any other tools that you discovered that were very helpful in your self-discovery journey?
Gosh, so like the tools that I sort of use are, we mentioned therapy, we mentioned psychedelics, which again, I don't take psychedelics all the time. It's only been twice in my 44 years. Yeah. And 2 times within the last 8 years. So it's not like it's that frequent. Those are tools that I use. I'm a pretty low need kind of guy. Like, I have my 7 to 8 really deep, close relationships, of which 2 or 3 are like exceptionally close. And I think the thing that I need out of those folks is that they know me almost better than I know me, and they call me out on my stuff, especially if they think I'm putting up a facade. So that's really tool number one, or the next tool is people that will call me out on my stuff. Like, my wife is that for me. Now, this is by contrast to my mother, who thinks everything I do is perfect, right? I could do no wrong for my mom. So it's tough to talk to my mom about certain things because she thinks that I am the best. I am perfect, right? So I can't tell her a situation about work because she'll immediately poo-poo whoever that is, or, like, I am the best. But having people in my life to support me. Goal setting, small or big, daily goals, weekly goals, yearly goals. I grew up always having goal setting. Unfortunately, it was to my detriment because for the first 25 years of my life, I had singular goals. First, it was I want to go to USC. Then I got to USC. Then it was I want to be a sports agent. Then I became a sports agent. So then I got it. I was like, all right, what's next? Then I want to go to business school. Then I want to get a job in consumer marketing. Then I want to start a business, and so on. So those are really my tools. I really wish I read more. I'm not a reader.
Yeah, that's great. You don't need many. I just wonder what, through actual experience, you found helpful. So, somebody in my audience may say, oh, I'll try that. Maybe it will help me.
I like thinking in terms of frameworks too, whether they're frameworks I make up or they're frameworks that other people use. And I know LinkedIn and social media is great right now for the dissemination of frameworks. So I like using them. One framework that I use when I start any business is it's in my own head, is you're either a manufacturer, distributor, or retailer. So I always tell founders, you can be one of those things. You can't be many. And we don't need to use this whole time talking about that because that would be an entire entrepreneurship lecture that I would give one day. But yeah, trying to think in terms of frameworks. The other tool I always use is knowing that nothing is ever really created. Business models are very rarely created. They're usually just borrowed or applied or evolved from others. And that's also true of human psychology, which is why we can kind of predict the future because it rhymes with the past. In other words, fashion trends, the next 10 years will probably resemble some fashion trends of the last 30. Yeah. And this is true for all sort of things. I also believe that the pendulum...
Stock market, geopolitics.
Yeah. Regression to the mean. Everything swings back. Right now, America's politics is swinging very far over here. Not right or left, but it's just far from a divisive perspective. But pretty soon it'll swing back. It's just a matter of, does that take 10 days, 10 months, 10 years, or 10 decades? But it'll swing back. It always does.
How do you think about personal growth? What's your overall direction?
I do think about this a lot. It's really just, was I better this time last year? Looking back at a calendar year is actually very easy, and I'm also really good with dates, so I'm always able to say, okay, cool, it's today, where was I last year? And even if I don't know the exact date, I knew roughly what I was doing. Was I happy with what I was doing this time last year? This time last year, I was sort of wrapping up my project with QVC. It's kind of done. I realized I didn't really fit in a big, as a public company officer. Like, I'm more of a founder. I also had a few business ideas, of which the two I've, about to kind of go public with. So I've done those. So I always just look, where was I last year? Am I better than I was? And if I'm not, which happens, it happens, then that's usually an inertia to make a big change.
So soon after you sold your company 10 years ago, did you feel you were wearing the mask, pretending to be someone that people expected you to be?
Yeah.
And then where are you now in terms of being authentic vis-a-vis other people?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it was, here I am. I sold this business at the peak. Protein bar was hot. Sold to private equity. Big valuation, big number. I personally took money in the bank. I started running with a crowd of other, CEOs and founders that were high level, very successful humans that loved them to death. They're just not me. Sort of like billionaire types and 100 millionaire types. That's just not me. I'm kind of a 0 to 1 grinder. So yes, I 100% was doing things that I thought others wanted. I also had that relationship that I mentioned where, I needed to present this air of success and gravitas, but I really don't. See to do, it's true to me. And it's taken a while.
on a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate your level of fulfillment?
A 9.9. Yeah, I'm pretty.
Oh my God. Never heard that before. Awesome.
I'm pretty fulfilled. I'm the luckiest guy on the planet. I got the best son. I got the best wife. I got to do what I said I always wanted to be a sports agent, and I got to do it, right? That was when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? That's what I wanted to be, and I got to do it. It turns out I didn't vibe with it and didn't stick with it. You know, 4.5 years of it was enough for me, but I sold a company that I started. I get to wake up every day doing whatever I want. I'm a white male in America, right? That's probably the biggest advantage that I have that I didn't even choose. Do I wish our society was behaving different ways, you know, whether it's social media consumption or, you know, youth insecurities or income inequality? Sure. But personally, I'm quite fulfilled. So yeah, 9.9. I'm kind of like on the top of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm kind of right there.
You feel you're self-realizing.
Yeah. Now it's like, what do I do with it? Right? What is the next 44 years? God willing, I'm able to live 44 more years. What does that mean?
So what does it mean?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it every day. To me, to be frank, it's really everything revolves around my son and making sure, I don't even know what I'm making sure of, but just making sure that he knows he's loved every day. And then trying to live as long as possible so that I can be there for him if he needs it. I was unlucky in that my dad died when I was 11, dropped dead, heart attack, middle of the night. I don't want to do that for Simon.
You better take care of your health.
Yeah, worked, doing all the things. If sugar weren't so chemically addicted, man, I'd be in great shape. But yes, you're absolutely right.
So you would say your 3-year-old son is the main source of your motivation at the moment?
It sounds cheesy because I used to always think that, like, when people said, "Oh, I do this all for I don't do things for my son. I do it for me." But I know that the things doing for me are aligned such that he can enjoy his life and he can be in the safest cocoon and bubble possible. There are certain sacrifices that you now make as a father and as a parent that you wouldn't normally have, where you live, what you go to. I hate the fact that I'm paying for school. Dude's 3 years old and I'm paying for preschool. That's just crazy to me, but I grew up public schools. But that's what you got to do here at this part of Brooklyn at this age that he's at, right? So it's just, so I pick up some more hours with my McKinsey work, or I try to, you know, make a better investment, or, you know, whatever it is. I make sacrifices here and there, but yeah. It's all for him, and then and my wife as well. She's the best. So
just to summarize things a little bit, what are the most important lessons you've learned since your big exit?
$1 billion question. I would say kind of tactically and then more sort of ethereal in nature. Tactically is just, if you're going to sell as much as you can. Don't make the mistake that I did where I sold, but the expression is ruled equity, right? I put so much of it forward. I ruled too much equity. In both instances, to be honest, Protein Bar and with Limitless, I had a big earn-out with Career Dr. Pepper. So tactically speaking, if you're going to sell. Or sorry, if you're going to give up control, just give up control and get paid for it. And then secondarily to that, sort of on like the personal touchy-feely side, is we all still control our own outcomes. We all still can change how we feel. You don't like your environment? Move. You don't like your job? Get better skills to get another job. You don't like your relationship status? Leave him or her, right? We all can still choose that. This is hard to remember. We all think that we're victims. I'm a victim of it myself, right? Or I think of it for myself too, but we're not. We can choose. Just choose. We all have choice.
So you said that soon after you sold your business, you felt quite depressed. Now you're saying that your fulfillment is pretty much, your rate of fulfillment is pretty much 10 out of 10. So how did you get from that low point to such a high point?
Well, to be clear, I don't think fulfillment and depression is on the same spectrum. A good example is I suffered wild depression this last year. I was fighting with QVC over my buyout. It was getting very ugly. It took me some time to figure out what I wanted to do next. That fight kind of made me feel like I was not the person that I really am. So it caused some pretty deep depression. Still fulfilled, right? Still working on a very large settlement, but not and fulfilled, but feeling feelings of depression. So the two can coexist. The fulfillment, I think, to me, is really more around reflecting on the past and where you're at in the present. And the depression, I think, is sort of around the hope for the future, which is sort of maybe the delineation that I had. And the depression was caused by this muck of not being certain about the future. Once that went away, both by having a settlement and then also by my own thinking, and then focusing on me controlling the future, I was able to get back to that level of fulfillment.
Okay. So it temporarily went down, and then now it's back up again.
Yeah, if we had to chart it out, I would say that it was maybe the fulfillment was paused, or the fulfillment was always there. I was fulfilled. It was just on hold while we frankly worked through a settlement on my buyout when I left that company to go do some other stuff. And there's going to be those blips, right? There's going to be temporary blips, whether it's, God forbid, my son or my wife or myself gets sick. Or 2 weeks ago, I hurt myself at the gym, and it meant 2 weeks I couldn't do my workouts that I wanted to. So there are all these little temporary blips, but I'm still fulfilled. Yeah, still quite fulfilled. I get to do whatever I want. How dope is that? I live in one of the best cities in the world. I got an amazing wife, amazing son. I get to wake up, do whatever I want. I'm around people that love me. My mom's still alive. My sister and niece are doing great. Like, pretty fulfilled.
So when you started your first business, what was the key motivation? Why you did it?
Yeah, it was every business I've ever started that I've been successful at was when I solved a problem for myself. So protein bar, I was doing triathlon, I was working for Kraft Foods, I was going to the little smoothie shop in the gym after working out, and they would sell these protein shakes for $8 and put tiny amounts of protein in. So I started bringing protein to them, and they'd blend it up for maybe $2. I was like, there should be a healthier food option. So I started it. Limitless. Caffeinated sparkling water there's coffee and cold brew, lots of caffeine, and then there's diet soda, a little bit of caffeine, just enough, just for a little perk, but filled with chemicals. So I just solved it myself, sparkling water with caffeine. So those have always been the best sources for me of new ventures, is just solving problems for myself.
So on a personal level, things like proving yourself or achieving financial freedom were not as important.
No, I don't think about that as much. It's really solving my problem and knowing that, not to sound arrogant, I can kind of execute better than a lot of people. I'm not smarter. I'm pretty smart, but I'm not the smartest guy. There's definitely smarter people in the world. But I can execute. And execute, obviously, is a catch-all expression for kind of getting stuff done, like breaking down walls, being resourceful. I'm kind of one of the best in the world at that. And that's something I wouldn't have said 10 years ago. I would have had, I don't want to sound like I'm not humble, because there's certainly humility with it, but it's sort of an appreciation for who I am and what I've become and what I'm good at.
Well, you built 3 successful businesses by the age of 44. You execute well. By any...
To be clear, it was 2 successful businesses, and a third one was kind of okay, but got me to...
Okay.
But yeah, so, wish me luck on these next ones.
So you started your second business 3 years after you sold the first one. Why did you do that?
Yes, I sold protein bar, traveled around, wanted to get into beverage, wanted to get into coffee. So I started a coffee business 2016 by doing wholesale coffee kegs into offices. This was during the cold brew craze. It was also during the time when a lot of these big offices didn't want beer on tap because it was a liability. So they had all these kegerators, so we would replace the kegs of beer with kegs of cold brew. Our first customer was the Chicago Cubs on opening day of the year they won the World Series, so that was pretty awesome. Right into the clubhouse, and then we landed WeWork and the like. So yeah, I was a coffee roaster and cold brewer. I had a whole cold brew facility. But then I started making mistakes. I started doing bottled coffee into grocery stores, which was a huge mistake. People don't buy coffee in grocery stores. They buy it at Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, or one of the 100,000 local coffee shops across the world. So that cost me gobs of money. I opened coffee shops that were very pretty, but burned cash. So there's some PTSD with that. And then fortunately, though, I was able to pivot to sparkling water, and that's what was a big success.
How did your view on money and wealth changed after your exit comparing to before?
I'm just now starting to get into this, but it's the concept of having enough. Like, I have to have enough. And then again, this was where the insecurities and the comparison to either my friends or peers or guys like Bezos and Musk and Gates, using wealth as the scorecard, sure, they win. But there are other metrics on the scorecard. Fulfillment is one of them, right? I kind of just have enough. But it's taken me, gosh, what is 2024 now? It's taken me gobs of years to figure that out.
Did money make you happy?
Money allowed me to do things that made me happy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So indirectly.
Mm-hmm. I think Scott Galloway is one of my favorite, talking heads. He says that money is a lubricant to happiness. I certainly believe him. One striking thing on my global tour, I remember being in Bali, and Indonesia is probably the poorest country or one of the poorest countries in the world. And the Balinese were the happiest people I ever met, man. They're super poor. They're real happy. It's when you introduce desire and things is when money turns into unhappiness. So.
Oh, that's true. I had a similar experience going to Cuba for the first time. I thought they were the happiest, the poorest people I've ever met.
Isn't that nuts? Yeah, I've heard a lot about people say that about Cuba.
Yeah. So who do you want to become when you grow up?
The best dad to Simon and the best husband to Beth ever.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I've already got to do what I always wanted to do. Like I said, be a sports agent, start a business. I have to support them, right? But I tell my wife, I'm like, babe, I'll always be able to make money. Like, I'll always find a way to put food on the table. And they don't need a lot, right? They just need a safe, warm house. So just be the best husband and father to those guys.
And how do you want to be remembered?
This is a tough question, right? This is sort of like the legacy question, or what is your eulogy? Who reads your eulogy? Just as a good person, just a kind guy, a guy who cared, tried to make a difference. That's it.
Matt, thank you so much.
Tried to make
that was my last question.
Thank you. This was fun. Can you join me for Therapy Thursdays? I bet Dr. Nero would love to have you.
Maybe I should. But I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm grateful that you give entrepreneurs like me and others and yourself a forum to talk through these things that maybe not many people know, especially when the world is filled with messages that are primed and prepared and designed to make people look their best. So this is a great forum.
Oh, well, you certainly intrigued me by your posts. Like, I could feel there is more there that I really wanted to dig into, because obviously if you just make a post on LinkedIn, you can't say quite as much as you can in an interview like this.
That's fair. I could write for hours. I've had to cut those down. And I mean, if you and I had 8 more hours, this would be the longest podcast in the history of podcasts if we had allowed it to be.
Let's do it again soon. How about that? We'll see how your thoughts developed in a couple of years.
I would love that. I'm at your service whenever.
Thank you so much again, Matt. A really, really wonderful conversation today.
Thank you. All right.
You have a wonderful day.